Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my remarks. My name is Charlotte Wood. I'm the Assistant Library Director, and I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's program, which is Native Plants and Seed Balls. The one good thing about Zoom is we can Zoom from anywhere. I happen to be at home. The library's closed due to the storm. I hope everything goes well. My internet connection once in a while gets a little unstable. I hope I can hang in there for the entire program, but if not, I know our presenter can carry on without me. The one thing I would ask you to do, if you have any questions tonight, to please use your chat box, and you can find chat at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and type in the questions anytime you have them. We will get to them after the slideshow presentation, probably during the time that we're making the seed balls. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Ginger Loritz. Ginger has been a gardener for much of her adult life, and a few years ago, she finished the requirements to become a master gardener. She's also been involved in the Native Seed Project for quite a while. She's a wealth of knowledge, and we're very lucky to have her this evening, and I'd like to thank her for donating her time. And before I turn it over to Ginger, I want to say that she has compiled a list of resources. These resources are going to be sent out in an email this evening around 10 o'clock p.m. So keep a lookout for it if you're interested in pursuing more information about the subject matter. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Ginger. Ginger, welcome.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your introduction, and thank you all for being here on this snowy, wintry night. I'm excited to show you all tonight how to make seed balls. This is a really fun project for to do with friends, family, children of all ages, and also to do with groups. We'll be using seeds from our wild native flowers, and so I'll be spending a little time talking about our native plants and flowers and their importance as part of the presentation. So as Charlotte mentioned, I'm a Master Gardener volunteer in York County in Maine. And I'm also a volunteer for the Wild Seed Project based in Portland, Maine, and I'll talk a bit about both of those. So this is the Native Plant Garden at the Wells Reserve at Laudholme, which is located in Wells, Maine. And this is, if you haven't been to the Wells Reserve, it's a great place to go and take a walk. They have over 2,200 acres and 7 miles of trails and some beautiful historic buildings, and you can walk from there to the beach at Drake's Island. It's a great place. So this garden was planted and maintained by the York County Master Gardener volunteers, and I am a coordinator for this garden. We've had a lot of fun with it, exhibiting native plants. In this picture, this is our native lupin. It's called sundial lupin. And it's called sundial lupin because these little pirouette leaves rotate with the sun as the sun moves across the sky. Much of the lupin that we see growing up here in Maine on the roadsides, and you probably have it in Massachusetts too, in people's gardens. The lupin that is multicolored is not our native lupin. That is lupin from the northwest part of the country. And while it does really well growing here, it doesn't support the wildlife that our sundial lupin does. So what we're trying to do around Maine is to reestablish populations of the native lupin, which has been extirpated, which means it's locally extinct. So it used to grow in sand plains, but it grows very well in home gardens. So many of us are growing it, and we're trying to reestablish it. Wild Seed Project is a nonprofit based in Portland, Maine, and it was founded in 2014 by Heather McCargo. And Heather McCargo was the head plant propagator at Garden in the Woods in Framingham, which is the former location of New England Wildflower Society, which is now Native Plant Trust. The mission at Wild Seed is stated here to inspire people to take action to increase the presence of native plants in our landscapes. At Wild Seed, we offer a seed sale with ethically collected and grown seeds. We also have offer walks and talks. There is a Wild Seed magazine that this is the 5th issue. It was issued last year. They have great articles from many different speakers. On the website, there's everything you need to know about growing native plants. Their Wild Seed Project is also offering for you to take the pledge to rewild and try to get 70% native plants in our home landscapes. And I'll talk about in a while about where that 70% came from. So today I'll be talking about seed balls. And again, native plants, how to get more native plants in your gardens. We'll say a little bit about the seeds that you've been given and the uses for seed balls. And these are seed balls in this picture, seed balls in Kenya, which have been used to restore deforested areas. So what are seed balls? They're tiny balls of earth, clay, water, and seeds. Some seed balls can be made with just seeds. And throwing seed balls is an ancient practice that farmers used to scatter seeds over large areas. And the advantage to doing it this way is when there's no disturbance to the soil. So when you plow the soil, you're disturbing the complex ecosystem in the soil, and also the soil can dry out. And they found that this way there was no disturbance of the soil. It was a better and more efficient way to plant at that time. The practice of throwing seed balls has been reintroduced by a farmer from Japan who wrote the book, The One Straw Revolution. There it is. It's nighttime. I have that resource at the end. So seed balls protect the seeds. These seeds can, when we scatter seeds, they can get eaten or blown away in the wind or washed away in a heavy rain, and it offers some weight, moisture, and protection for the seeds. So just imagine that you could take a walk and scatter wildflower seeds as you go, leaving beautiful meadows and forests in your wake. Anyone who is familiar with the story of Miss Rumphius knows that that's what she did. Miss Rumphius traveled the world, and sometime when she was riding a camel or an elephant, I don't remember what, but she injured her back. And when she came back, her doctor told her that she needed to walk. And I, as a physical therapist, thoroughly support that. Also, when Miss Rumphius was little, her grandfather told her to leave the world a more beautiful place. So Miss Rumphius combined those two things, and she scattered lupin seeds all over Maine as she walked. And unfortunately, these are the Northwest lupins, but that's okay. If we were to write Miss Rumphius now, I think we'd use the sundial lupin. But anyway, have you ever purchased a packet of wildflower seeds and scattered them around and found that you might have gotten a couple black-eyed Susans, but you didn't really see much else, and so you just planted something else there? And there's a reason why you don't see these instant meadows and forests, and that's because there's a very low chance of germination in the wild, less than 1%. And that's why plants produce such an abundance of seeds, because the germination is so low. So when the seeds again are eaten, blown away, or washed away, and the seed ball gives the seeds some protection, again, weight and moisture. So a common pitfall of scattering wildflower seeds is, again, that we see nothing come up and then we just plant something else there. So we have to be patient. So why are native plants important? They are vitally important. They provide the habitat, food and habitat that supports populations of butterflies, bees, birds, and other forms of life. Our native plants have co-evolved with the other animals in our ecosystem, and they have formed complex relationships. And so they need each other. And these relationships form over millions of years. So in the case of the monarch butterfly, somewhere around the end of the last ice age, the monarch caterpillar developed an ability to tolerate the toxins that are in milkweed leaves. Milkweed leaves contain cardiac glycosides, and they can make caterpillars and other animals not feel very well. So the milkweed caterpillars had adapted to tolerate these toxins, which is a win-win. The milkweed doesn't have a lot of things eating it except for monarchs, and the toxin that is in the monarch leaves makes the caterpillars not taste very good to the birds that try to eat them. So it's a win-win. We have some little juvenile caterpillars over here making some mischief when they're supposed to be doing their job of eating the milkweed leaves. So I'm going to speak here for a moment about Doug Tallamy. Doug Tallamy is an entomologist. He studies bugs, and he's out of the University of Delaware. And he has written the book, Bringing Nature Home, and perhaps many of you have heard of him. I'm bringing up here for a couple of reasons. First of all, to explain my next point, and also because Charlotte told me that Doug Tallamy will be speaking at the Wilmington Library, and you'll be able to hear him through the, at the Andover Library, and that you'll be able to hear him through the Wilmington Library. So I strongly encourage anyone to attend this webinar. He is delightful, he's funny, he has great pictures, and he has changed my life and the way I garden and the way I think about nature. So what Doug did at his new property when he's building his house in Delaware is he walked around his property and he looked at, he studies bugs, so he looked at caterpillars, and he looked at the plants on his land that were native plants, and he looked at the plants that were non-native. And what he found was that there were so many more caterpillars and insects on the native species and hardly any on the non-native. So why is this important? Why do we care about caterpillars? It's because almost all of us songbirds need caterpillars to feed their babies. You might see the birds eating seed at your bird feeder or eating fruit, but when it comes to raising their babies, they need caterpillars. And this is our beloved chickadee, your Massachusetts state bird, and also our Maine state bird. And you might notice that they're gone from your feeders from late spring to early summer, and that's because that's when they're having their babies. And so one of Dr. Tallamy's graduate students studied chickadees and their foraging areas. And what they found was that from 6 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, the chickadees were flying to the trees and shrubs and flying back to feed their babies and using their beaks as a plunger to get those caterpillars down into the baby's throats. And no sooner do they feed them than they're yapping for more, and off they go. And they do this all day long. And so this graduate student of Dr. Tallamy's, her name was Desiree Narango, she found that to feed one clutch of chickadees requires 6,000 to 10,000 caterpillars. The other finding she had was that in landscapes that had less than 70% native plants, and this is especially native trees and shrubs, it means a declining ecosystem for breeding chickadees, which is very sad news for chickadees. It's so important that's where that 70% number comes from. It's so important to increase the amount of native plants we have in our own landscapes. That picture on the right, you can't really tell, but that's a juvenile chickadee. And so not only does the mother have to feed them when they're babies, but the mother continues to feed them when they're fledgling for a couple weeks. So mother and father, both mom and dad feed chickadees. So not only insects, also seeds, goldfinches love seeds, and they have their babies later in the summer. And they are one species that can grind up in whatever, make a pulp from the seeds and feed their babies seeds, but they also feed them caterpillars. And then of course, our native plants provide fruit for the birds. And many of the fruits of the non-native plants in our landscapes can bother the digestive systems of the birds. They can give the birds diarrhea. And if you have diarrhea, things are passing quickly through your system and you're not absorbing nutrients. And they found also that the berries aren't necessarily as nutrient dense as the native berries. So another argument for native plants. So there's been a decline in our native plant populations, which has affected our insects, birds, and other animals. And the decline is from land clearing, development, deforestation, and also from the proliferation of invasive species. So again, if the native plant populations are down, it's going to affect the caterpillars, it's going to affect the bird populations. It's not good news. And so we have some unhappy insects here and a very unhappy bird. So one other thing I'd like to say about our native plants is that native plants grown from seed support biodiversity. So when you grow a native plant from seed, each plant is genetically different from every other plant, just as we are different from our brothers and sisters. And in a genetically diverse plant population, you might have some individuals that might be more tolerant to heat or to drought, or might be more disease resistant, or might tolerate flooding. And there is the opportunity for that plant population to adapt to changing conditions such as climate. When most of the plants that we get from nurseries today are cultivated varieties of plants. Cultivated varieties always have a catchy name in single quotes, and almost every plant at the nursery has this. Not all cultivated plants are bad for our insects and animals. The problem is in their reproduction. They are reproduced asexually, usually by tissue culture, and that means you've got a population of genetically identical clones. And in a genetically identical plant population, you don't have that adaptability to changing conditions. It's greatly reduced. So it's very hard to find native plants grown from seed. Mostly plant sales are places like Garden in the Woods in Framingham. And so I urge everybody to ask for native plants grown from seed when you go shopping for plants, because I feel like if enough people ask, maybe they'll get the message and start providing them. I love that meadow picture. It's so beautiful with the purple coneflower, and those are green head coneflowers, and then the wild bee balm. Lovely combination. So it's up to us to create inviting habitats for nature to thrive. And we do that by planting native plants from seed. So how do we get more native plants in our garden? The best way to get the most amount of plants is to grow your own from seed, and this is done in pots. So if you were to have a package of native plant seeds from Wild Seed Project, you would sprinkle all of that package in one pot and let that pot grow through the spring and into the summer. So this is the summer after the fall when these were planted. And each of those pots, I mean, some of them contain 50, 75 plants when you divide it out. So you can get a ton of native plants by growing them this way. It's beyond the scope of this webinar to talk about it, but I do have written instructions from Wild Seed, and I also made a video of this process that we will include in your resources. Basically, we plant in pots, and then the pots are just put outside for the winter. It's as easy as that. So read more. So the other way to get native plants in the garden or in the landscapes is to make and toss seed balls. And just to remind you, growing native plants requires a lot of patience. Most are perennials. They won't bloom the first year. Some won't bloom for 2 or 3 years before you see a significant amount of bloom. Again, a common pitfall is to think they didn't make it and plant something else there. But I had the experience with my son. We made seed balls with my grandson and threw them around the perimeter of his property, and just kind of didn't see anything. The following, we threw them in the fall or winter, didn't see anything the following summer. And then the next summer, he called and said, "Do you know what all these flowers are coming up around the yard, and there they were, but we didn't really see evidence of the plants growing. So anyway, it does require some patience. And if you plant them in your own gardens or in your own yards, designate the area and try to keep weeds out as best you can. So just to talk about the seeds that you have, there's lots of information about these seeds on the Wild Seed Project website, which is where I got these pictures. But I'll just speak briefly about them. Spotted bee balm on the left is a really cute bee balm. It's shorter than most of the bee balms we have. It's only a couple feet high. It's a short-lived perennial that will seed around your garden a little bit in a nice way. I love that it blooms when there's a lull in the bloom in my garden. You know, the early summer things have gone by and the fall things haven't come in yet. And that's when spotted bee balm will start to bloom. And it's really unique plant. And I've had a lot of fun with it. In the middle, smooth blue aster. It's my favorite aster. It's a lovely color blue and it's a uniform blue. It's a fall bloomer and the bees love it. And on the right, black-eyed coneflower, another short-lived perennial that will seed around, also in not a bad way. When black-eyed coneflower seeds around, you get a basil rosette seedling on the ground. And that actually is a great way to provide a living mulch for your garden, is to allow these black-eyed coneflower little rosettes to just protect the soil from moisture loss. So another winner in the garden. Part sun, part shade, average to moist. On the left, New England aster. It's definitely gets high points for the amount of insects that it attracts in my garden. Lots of butterflies, monarchs love it. Bees love it. Excuse me, it's really late in the season. So when many of your other flowering plants have gone by and New England aster comes out, it's just covered with wonderful insects. The other two plants can tolerate a little more shade, but they tolerate sun. They're generally plants that grow where, you know, the beginning of a woodland area or where there's a lot of light in a woodland area. I put these two in here because they look awesome when they're blooming together. So these three plants are, I have a drainage ditch near my house, and that's where these plants grow. They like it wet a lot of the year. They don't tolerate severe dryness. They do need some moisture. So I almost was going to put wet sites because that is a little more accurate for these plants. So if you chose these kinds of seeds, you're going to find a drainage ditch somewhere. And I have a little drainage ditch story at the end of this presentation. And dry shade's always a problem for people. The blue stem goldenrod, it's also called bridal veil goldenrod. And I'm not sure if it's because the stems were woven into a crown or I don't know, but it's very delicate and very pretty goldenrod. Sometimes we think of goldenrods as being thugs of plants that take over the whole yard. But the goldenrods that are offered by Wild Seed Project are not those goldenrods. Blue stem goldenrod and bluewood aster look beautiful blooming together. And we have wild columbine in the middle that blooms earlier in the season. It's a great hummingbird plant and just a wonderful plant to have in the garden. So when do we toss our seed balls? Our native plants have evolved with our climate, in our climate, and we have, so they need a winter because we have winter, especially tonight. So the amount of cold period that our native seeds need before they germinate varies from species to species. For some, it's several months. For some, it can be as little as 10 days. And so to be safe, we say if you're going to throw seed balls or plant native plants, plant them anytime between late November to mid-February. So next couple of weeks, you'll want to do this if you would like to plant the native seeds. Where to toss seed balls? Anywhere where you'd like to see more native plants, especially, you know, ugly areas. Maybe your neighbor has one and you're tired of looking at it, so you can throw some seed balls over there. Drainage ditches, roadsides, especially when there's been work on the roadsides and they've cleared out the plants. I know up here we have a couple of invasives. One of them, I can't think of the name right now, but anyway, the invasives love to take over those spaces. But if you can get in there and throw a whole bunch of seed balls, that will help. Railway lines, cleared lands, if there's been any deforestation, your own yard, or anywhere you'd like to see plants. And just as a reminder, you have to have permission before you throw seed balls into any national parks or conservation lands. So we're getting to the seed balls. For materials, you'll need equal parts of potting soil and clay. You can use earth and clay, or you can use just potter's clay. And I think you have the equivalent as a quarter cup of each, and it will make about 20 to 30 balls. Warm water, add a little bit at a time, and then seeds. And pinch for the smaller seeds. If you're doing milkweed seeds, which are those over on the right, which are pretty true to size, only about 3 seeds in a seed ball if you're using seeds that large. And if you're making seed balls with nuts, tree nuts, you would use 1 per seed ball. Alrighty, so I've prepared a video on how to make the seed ball mix and all. The seed, you have the mix already done, but just to show you the process.
Hello again. To make our seed balls, you'll need a quarter cup measure, and we'll be using equal parts of all natural kitty litter without additives or chemicals, and organic potting soil. You'll need warm water and seeds, of course, but we're going to put those aside for now. Your hands will be getting messy and sticky, so it's good to keep some extra warm water and a towel nearby. Combine the kitty litter and the potting soil. Just gently mixing. That looks good. Take our warm water and begin to slowly drizzle over the ingredients. I like to work on a baking tray because cleanup is much easier than if it's on my counter. And also the lip keeps it off the floor. So you want to make sure you add your water just a little bit at a time. It's always easier to add water than it is to deal with a mud puddle in your pan, which has happened to me. So it's looking pretty sticky. And just a little more mixing. And at this point, we're going to just set this mixture aside to allow the clay and soil to hydrate. And I recommend about 10 to 15 minutes. Once it's hydrated, you'll take a small pinch and you're going to press it together, see if you can make it into a ball. And these balls are pretty small, somewhere around the size of a dime. Sometimes mine look like nickels. If you find that it's a little dry, just tap your finger in some water and tap it over the top. And that will give you just enough moisture to hold the ball together. So you can press them together with your fingers. I've also found that if I cup my hand a little bit, I can work it into a ball. They don't have to be perfectly round. So your hands are going to begin to get sticky, and you'll notice that the mixture is sticking to your hands. And after a bit, you'll find that making a ball can be a little difficult because it is so sticky. having to work a little harder to make this ball. And look what happens, it just fell apart. So what I recommend is cleaning your hands, getting that sticky mud off of them, and continuing on. So I find that after every 4 or 5 balls, I end up having to clean my hands. And there we have it. It's time to put the seeds in the balls. So you'll take the ball in the palm of your hand and make an indentation with your finger. And your finger is now a little wet. And if you just dab your finger into the seeds, just get a very small amount of seeds. You're going to press them in and then sort of take the corners and encase the seed. And again, if it feels dry at this point, you can just tap your finger in water. If you're using larger seeds like milkweed seeds, you'll only put about 3 seeds in each seed ball. If you're working with little children, I've done these with my grandchildren, you can actually roll the balls in seeds. But wild seed, we generally encase them. And it goes quickly. So after these seed balls are done, we are going to let them sit for about 10-15 minutes. And then if you're not going to toss them right away, we recommend putting them in plastic bags and in the refrigerator. And if you'll notice, that plastic bag said seed balls, not truffles. I don't want anybody eating our seed balls. So seal it up, and they can stay in your refrigerator for quite a long time before tossing. Hello
Whoops.
again.
That's there we go. I have just a little video about this drainage ditch project I did, but I think I'm going to, in the interest of time, skip over that. It's not really that exciting anyway, but I just wanted to show that this is a drainage ditch down at the end of my street. And you can see on the left is this coastal Joe Pye weed, and on the right there's boneset, and there are ferns in there, and there were asters and goldenrods, and in the back there was some sassafras seedlings. It was just a great place full of native plants. And the couple summer, I guess 2 years ago, the town came through and excavated the whole thing. So it was completely devoid of plants the next summer. So I had thrown a whole bunch of the seed ball that has the plants that you have in the for the moist places, these coastal Joe Pye and bones that I had thrown a whole bunch of seed balls, and we'll look next summer to see how they're doing and seeing if they're come up. So I'm just going to skip over that. That's just an example of what you can do with them. And just, this is Kenya, where those bags on the left are seed balls. And there's been so much deforestation in Kenya, and I just wanted to show you on a global scale what they're doing with seed balls, and notice how degraded the land is. And these volunteers are all going and throwing seed balls to reforest the area. So very exciting project. And just a couple other pictures of people throwing seed balls. You can use slingshots if you have one. And this is a web page from Wild Seed Project. All the information you need about making seed balls, or seed bombs as they're sometimes called, you'll find on this page. It also lists the seeds that work best to make the balls. And for more information, we invite you to check out the Wild Seed Project website. You will not be disappointed. Here's the list of resources you'll get. I'm not going to spend time on that. And we, of course, have to end with a cartoon. And it's time for us to make seed balls. All right, Charlotte, are you there?
I am here. 1 second, I'll
Okay.
start my video. Yes, I'm here. So, all right, on to the working part of this.
Okay. All right. So you all have a packet of, I can't see people, but that's, I can't, is there a way?
Yes, but they can see you. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Let me look at Gal up.
So, and everyone had
Okay,
instructions.
all right, so take your plastic bag of your mixture and go ahead and dump it out. I'm gonna just tilt my camera down. I have the same mixture you did, and when I made it, it held the seed balls well, but it's been sitting in your bags or in your refrigerator or wherever. So dump that out. Have your seeds ready. I'm gonna just put mine in a little cover here. And again, your water and your towel. So go ahead and take a pinch of seeds as we did in the video. And and it's probably going to need a little more water. If yours is like mine, it looks like it's breaking on the edges. So I'm just going to dab my finger in the water, wet the top. And there we have it. So you'll make your seed balls first. We'll do all the seeds after. Otherwise, your hands are wet and sticky and your seeds will be all over them and you'll run out of seeds really quickly. So at this point, I can take questions. This is the first time I've ever done this webinar with people working at home. So I'm interested in how it works out. I hope everybody had a chance to pick up their seeds.
I was gonna say, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. And I do have one question. I think you answered it, Ginger, but when you first mentioned the lupine, the
Yes.
native one, in the very
Mhm.
beginning, and you said it had kind of, I'll say died out or really isn't around much anymore.
Here, it's around other places. It's around other, it's on the prairie, it's common.
Right, but in the Northeast or in Maine,
Locally, yeah.
not common anymore. And is that mainly due to the deforestation or the?
Well, because it grew in a sand plain, which wasn't really a forested area anyway. We're not really sure if it's been picked, you know, and as the population gradually decreased, you know, if it reaches a limit where it's going to die out, because the other plants that grew with the sundial lupin continue to grow. Most of them continue to grow in the wild. So another one, if people are familiar with butterfly milkweed, that was also a lovely milkweed plant. It's not as rangy as the wild milkweed, the common milkweed, but that also grew in the sand plain with the sundial lupin. So, and that's gone also. No, and these are both very attractive plants. So they're plants that people would have dug up.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure if that's the only reason. Are there any questions?
Yeah, no questions. Well, here we go. When should we throw the seed balls outside? April, May?
So some of your plants need a long cold period. And so we say by the middle of February, you should get your seed balls out. But if you have like asters and the spotted bee balm, some of those plants need a much shorter cold period, but they might be mixed with plants that need a longer one. So to be safe, get them out by the middle of February. I'd like to hear some feedback if people are making their seed balls and how they're doing.
Here's another question. Okay to throw in between plants in existing garden?
Yes. And I recommend if you're going to put them in an existing garden, I would press them into the soil a little bit. And then just remember where they are, because when you go around pulling your weeds, they're just going to be showing a little tiny bit of growth in the spring. And some of them will come up in late spring. So when you think, oh, there's, I'm not seeing it, it can still come up later.
And
So
it might look like weeds.
it might. You need to know your weeds. Yeah, but also mark where you put them if you want to experiment with them. But yes, absolutely, you can put them in between your other plants.
If your hands aren't too dirty and you can type about how it's going, let us know if the seed balls or if you're forming the balls okay.
There are a couple. I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat. Let me see if I can open my chat.
Yeah, that's where I'm asking. Yeah, I have seeds for wet ground. Will they grow in not wet places?
And I meant to mention this. Many of these seeds are adaptable to multiple habitats. They will grow in places that aren't wet. I have coastal Joe Pye weed and boneset growing in my front yard, which is the soil's pretty sandy. And so I might give them a little extra water if they need, but they're all pretty adaptable to varied conditions. So don't worry too much if you don't have what you consider the right seeds, because I've got them all growing in my yard.
So, and someone asked, are seed packets still available at the library? I had a paper bag with all the attendees' names that have the seed packets, the soil instructions. So if you did not have a chance to pick up your bag, we will keep them at the library through the end of the week. But everyone who picked up a bag should have had seeds. If you didn't, if I forgot a packet of seeds, I think I was pretty thorough, but if I forgot one, let me know. I do have some extra seeds, a few extra packets, because we had 25 made and we had 22 people register. So I do have a couple of seed packets remaining.
So the packets of seeds are available at Wild Seed Project. They offer many species of seeds, and you get a discount on seeds with membership. So that's how I started out.
And there's one comment, making the balls is fun. So somebody's having at least fun, if not success.
Is anyone having any trouble with them or have had experience in the past? Any experiences people would like to share? Is there a way we can get people live or not? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
Okay. All right.
Let me see if I can figure this out.
I miss the interaction with people.
Right.
It's hard talking to a dot on your screen.
Yeah, so we did a webinar format, and this might have been, since it's a small group, and suited to a meeting, but
Right. Okay, yeah. So any difficulty?
yeah. So far, let me see.
Has anyone out there heard Doug Tallamy speak?
I never have. I heard he's, well, I think you were the one that told me that he's
Okay, if we get more seeds and plant in a pot, would you suggest once the plant grow, moving into the soil? So I didn't go into this, but since we do have some time, I will talk about it. As far as planting the native plants in pots, you'll sprinkle the seeds in we usually use 4-inch pot and cover it with sand. You want to cover your plants with sand because it helps them from blowing away. It also helps them from splashing out in a heavy rainstorm. So we use coarse builder's sand and cover the seeds over. So you're going to take it, they're going to start to come up in the spring, and you're going to basically take care of them in pots through the whole first summer. So you'll start to see them grow. When they start to outgrow the pot, you can take them out of the pot and either move them into a bigger pot, or you can divide them into clumps of maybe, just if you have a 4-inch pot, maybe 4 clumps or 6 clumps, and repot them. And so you're going to continue to take care of them until the end of the summer. And this way, you're assured that they're not going to dry out. You can move them into the shade if they're in too much sun. You don't want these little seedlings to be baking in the hot 90-degree sun. And then in September, when there's less competition from other plants and when the soil's moist, they can go into the garden then. I took handfuls of milkweed seeds and dug small holes and threw them. Yes, because the answer to that, will they grow? Do I think yes, because that's what Mother Nature does. She attaches these little tufts to them, and they float somewhere and drop to the ground, and they germinate. But remember, that percentage of less than 1% germination. That's why plants produce such an abundance of seeds, because the germination is so low. But if any place you can scatter milkweed seeds, yes, there's going to be an amount of them that will germinate. Germination from all these plants in pots is very high. So, if you have a pot full of seeds, you're going to have a pot full of seedlings. It's a great way you'll get much better germination than you will if you put them outside. Okay, after you make the balls, should they go in the refrigerator till you throw them in the yard? That's what we do, but there are places that allow the balls to dry. So, but heather and wild seed, just to make sure the seed's protected, put them back in the plastic bag and put them in the refrigerator. Yep. And can the balls be thrown in snow-covered ground? Absolutely. They might roll somewhere, but yeah, it's great to throw them in snow-covered ground. So go ahead, go crazy. Anybody else?
Any more questions? Please feel free to type them in the chat box. I wanted to say that Doug Ptolemy, our library has partnered with several of the area libraries starting in the fall, and we collaborate on programming. So Andover was the one that reached out to Doug Ptolemy, but there's going to be 6 or 7 libraries that will be promoting his program. So you can sign up on the Wilmington Library's website for that program. And we'll be having actually quite a few environmental themed programs in April. And we're trying to do a lot of outdoor things because we've all been Zooming, and hopefully April will be good weather. We're having a vernal pool program. We're going to be having in May a foraging walk. We've rescheduled the cemetery walk, which is about Mrs. Hiller. That's going to be in May. We're hoping to have a pickup, like picking up trash and being rewarded with pizza certificates. That will be in April. And Town Forest Walk is also in April. So we're trying to schedule things where you'll be outside actually and being active. So those were all coming up in the spring. So there's a few more things here. When should we throw them out? Do you see that, Ginger?
Oh, yes. Again, throw them out within the next couple of weeks. What kind of seeds need to be pushed into the ground? None of them need to be pushed into the ground. Mother Nature doesn't push anything into the ground. It's just like I noticed with the seed balls in Kenya, I think they might have been like stepping on the seed just to get it to stay where it was. So if you want this particular plant to stay where it is, you can just push the seed ball down into the ground, but otherwise, you can leave them exposed. And I'm thinking in my mind about when you're growing in pots, some seeds require light to germinate. And just remember that if you are growing in pots, there are codes on the seed packets that say whether they need light or and if that's the case, you would not place sand over the pots. But I go over that in the video. Great to talk about new life and growth. Yes, it is. Okay, invasive plants, perennial sunflower, firecracker, loosestrife. Will the seed balls survive if thrown near the invasive plants, or will they just be choked out? I think they have a very low chance of surviving. What we usually recommend if they're invasives, if you want to clear invasive out of a part of an area, put cardboard down and then put mulch or soil on top of the cardboard just to choke out those plants. And you actually leave that for a year, and then you can actually dig right in and plant things. But invasive plants are invasive for a reason. They're very good at growing and taking over other plants. So I think it's the seed balls will survive, but will they live and grow to maturity, I don't feel hopeful about that.
Any other questions? Hope everyone's being successful. I plan to make some seed balls at the library if I have, if all the supplies aren't picked up. So this will be a fun project to do there. Oh, one more, I think, just
On
came
a
through.
beehive, I think so. Well, first of all, remember that all of our wildflower, our native wildflower seeds are pollinator plants. All of our native wildflower plants are pollinator plants. They have evolved with these insects, and they're heavily used by insects. Honeybees are not a native bee, but honeybees have generalists as far as their diet. And so these plants all have pollen and nectar, so they will be great for honeybees.
That's great. So Ginger, what do you have? Do you have anything growing in pots or?
Oh yes, I have a 4-foot by 8-foot bed in my yard that is filled with 4-inch pots. One of the things that we do at the Wells Reserve, this will be our 3rd year of we do a plant sale with the plants that I've grown in my yard. We do that in June. So if anyone's up there, you can check it out. It's usually advertised on the Wells Reserve website. We don't have a date yet, but it may be towards the end of June. We'll see. But there are plant sales around Maine Audubon. If you're ever up in that area, has a great native plant sale in June. And I'm sure there are tons in Massachusetts if you look.
And would you say that the main native plants would be the same or very
Oh
similar?
yeah, when we're talking about
New England,
an eco-region, you know,
Yep.
it's a region with the same, like the eastern deciduous forest, you know,
Yes.
the sand plain. These are regions, and many of these plants, you know, are down in Virginia, you know, and
Yes.
native plants move, populations move with climate and all. Pretty soon, all of Virginia's plants will be our plants.
Well, you know, what's interesting is we had a bird watching program. I don't know if anyone who's with us this evening went. We had a winter bird walking event a few weekends ago. And the gentleman that led it said that he was naming, I can't remember the species of bird, but he said, we almost never saw that species of bird here 20 years ago or so. And now it's very common. He says the species are moving up as the winters have gotten milder. So it's interesting. Yeah.
We never had eastern bluebirds spend the winter here.
Yeah.
And they're spending the winter here now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as the climate changes, so does the
Things are changing.
wildlife and the plant life.
Yeah.
Well, very interesting and informative. Thank you. I think we may have ended the, informational questions. So Ginger, I want to thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your seed balls. I hope it's going well at home. And I hope you have some lovely plants come the fall, right?
And if you think of questions that you haven't asked, you can send them to Charlotte. She'll get them to me and I will respond to you.
Yes.
I want to get people out there growing native plants and making seed balls and all that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. With that, I hope you check out the resource list and thank you all for being here and stay safe.
Yes, and thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.